in 10 of the 13 Michigan 500. So there he is, out in front, Mario Andretti, followed by the battle between Luyendyk and Mansell. Scott Goodyear into fourth. Raul Boesel runs in fifth. In sixth place is Paul Tracy as we follow the Boesel and Tracy story. Seventh across the line, Robbie Gordon, then Brayton, then Teo Fabi and Roberto Guerrero. And Nigel Mansell moves again.
You got to remember, Paul, too, these are all Lola Fords. The two, the Andretti car, the Mansell car, and the red and black one right there, Luyendyk, all Lola Ford. So the speed shouldn't be just about the same. But remember another thing, grafting here will make a lot more difference than it does in a lot of the tracks.
Battle for fourth and fifth, Raul Boesel, Scott Goodyear.
Bobby, I think the key to what you just said is the Ford part. In qualifying, the Ford engines have absolutely dominated. You see Tracy on the right there. He's the front-running Chevrolet.
Well, Paul Tracy closes in on Scott Goodyear. On the Ford engines themselves, Jack Arute has an update. Jack?
Well, Paul, the Ford engines may be having a problem in the telemetry. It seems during the practice session, they did not get all of the telemetry back from the race cars via the radio wave. All the Ford engineers have been working with their laptop computers. They are still not getting an accurate reading of all the items that they should be measuring. So there's a lot of head scratching and a lot of concern for all the Ford teams. Ironically, the only team that's not experiencing the problem is Mario Andretti's Newman Haas team.
Nigel Mansell just blistered off the fastest lap of the race thus far at 221 miles an hour.
Mansell was highly critical of the track after just a few laps around it back on Friday, but he has obviously taken control of this situation despite having so little experience here.
On board, Nigel Mansell, as he now in pursuit from second place of his teammate Mario Andretti on a very high learning curve. Teo Fabi, Scott Brayton. Battle about seventh position.
Paul, a lot of the drivers and the car owners have planned their deals to run hard the first couple laps and then to cut back. And the way they cut back on their speed or hurting their engines a little bit is by shifting to a higher gear ratio. Or in other words, turning a little bit less RPM. And that's what they're starting to do right now.
Robbie Gordon, car 14, the black car, runs in the seventh place. Closing on him is Scott Brayton. Lives not far from here in Coldwater, Michigan.
Remember, these are the fastest runs you will see in competition. The fastest laps as Brayton pulls alongside Gordon for a moment. At any time during the entire automobile racing season, this is the highest speed you will see.
Scott Brayton just didn't get a run at him there, Sam. He tried, but he just pulled out, and then the wind hit him, and he went right backwards. But
Scott Goodyear makes the move on Boesel, so Scott Goodyear moves into fourth place. Boesel stays in contact.
Boesel, of course, felt he should have won Indianapolis had he not been penalized. This is his chance to come back on a high-speed track, a lot like Indianapolis, and prove his point. You see him running right behind Scott Goodyear there. Boesel in the orange car.
Raul Boesel, a quiet man, but a very proud man, was furious after the Indy 500. As we heard earlier, he thought he had the combination and the skill and a chance, and that black flag cost him dearly.
And of course, Goodyear also in the blue car has a great deal to prove. He won here last year, but since then his career has gone very flat. Much was expected of him, and it has gone flat.
And remember, both of these are Ford engine cars. Watch Scott Goodyear right there getting a draft. He had a good draft on him, and once you get a slingshot, you go right on by.
So Scott Goodyear moves into fourth place. The top of the order is Mario Andretti, Mansell, and Arie Luyendyk sits in third. So the Michigan 500 is underway at a good fast pace above 221 miles an hour. We'll be back. Back at the Michigan 500, Michigan International Speedway, and Arie Luyendyk definitely has been struggling the last couple of laps. Whether or not it is intentional or not is the question. Scott Goodyear got past him, then Raul Boesel, and then Paul Tracy. And now Paul Tracy, running in fifth place, is closing on the back of Boesel. But Arie Luyendyk has been falling steadily backwards.
He's got a straightaway problem, Paul. There he is, you can see. Here comes Scott Goodyear by him. Of course, he's got a good draft going by him. Scott did that one right. But we see some other cars passing Luyendyk, and he seems to run through the turns good. But as he gets about a fourth way down the straightaway, the engine seems to lose power right there. There's Raul Boesel right behind him there.
Raul Boesel as he set up the pass on Ari, and Ari seemed to move to the high line, and Boesel just came on past without too much trouble at all. The next pass, of course, is that of Paul Tracy as he lined up, and they did, in fact, come to an opportunity to fight for just a moment. So 2 cars already passed Luyendyk. Now here comes Paul Tracy. But Luyendyk came back to battle with him a bit as they ran through the corner. Still, Paul Tracy finally took the position, but they continue to remain locked in battle. And Paul Tracy definitely by him. Let's go to Gary Gerould.
Paul, a quick word on Ari Luyendyk. They were worried that it was a boost problem. That doesn't seem to be the case. Instead, it's just a severe case of the car not handling well. He has a severe case of understeer, particularly in turn number 2. That's what he has to contend with, most likely until the first pit stop.
Chip Ganassi, car owner for Ari Luyendyk. Bobby Unser not handling. Pretty early to have that problem.
Yes, it's way too early, and the racetrack is nice shape. You know, we had a little bit of rain. The racetrack is just perfect right now.
Fittipaldi closing on Scott Brayton. Remember, Fittipaldi had not a great qualifying day, a terrible qualifying day, but now he is up, challenging for 8th place.
Both the Penske cars are running better now in the race than they did in qualifying. Typical of what happened at Indianapolis, too, where they qualified badly, came on, and, of course, Fittipaldi won the race.
And, Sam, let's keep in mind now, everybody has, in order to make this 500 miles, it's the toughest race in the entire circuit as far as engines and chassis and drivers go. So, in order to make it, they all have to cut back their RPM so they run a higher gear, and some of them cut their boost back a little bit because they realize that you can look really good and halfway through the race break. They've all been through this before, so they're definitely going to be cut back a little bit now. All except for Mario and Mansell seem to be hooking it up really hard.
Nothing changes at the front of the field. This is the battle for 7th place. Robbie Gordon is trying to hold off a very lively Scott Brayton.
And Gordon, and there in the black car, has had a terrific mid-season. He's had a 10th. There's Brayton making a move on him, but Gordon has become Mr. Reliable with a 10th, a pair of 8s, and 2 6ths for his last 5 races going into this. He's starting to take the long view instead of just trying to win every race in the first lap.
Side by side through the 3rd and 4th turn, side by side through the tri-oval. They get very close together. And Brayton holds on. Here comes Fittipaldi, closing just behind them. So now it's a 3-way battle.
Remember, with 2 guys running side by side the way Gordon and Scott did, you can just imagine the draft that Fittipaldi was getting from that. It's almost like a vacuum sucking him up to the 2 of them.
Is it, though, Bobby Unser, a good draft, or is there some turbulence in there that can cause a problem?
Oh, it's a really good draft, Paul, especially in the straightaways. In the turns, it's going to be a lot of turbulence. He won't like that. But, man, he can back off half the throttle when he's running with him like that.
Following the same battle from the Goodyear blimp floating over Michigan International Speedway here. Michigan International celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. And once again, here comes Brayton. They move to the backstretch. This is where he's been able to get his best run on Gordon.
And again, Fittipaldi slowly begins to inch towards both of them.
Now we think, or at least I think, that Brayton probably could have moved up on Robbie Gordon in the black car a little bit quicker than he did right then. But all of these drivers realize this track is a man killer. They're all going to be desperately tired if they make it to the end.
Remember that Scott Brayton comes from Coldwater, Michigan, very near here. So the stands are packed with Scott Brayton fans. He's very popular here in his home state.
Now coming to the backside with perhaps that little extra effort because of the hometown crowd. And here Scott Brayton is alongside. He got a good draft into the corner this time, and he goes past Gordon. So Scott Brayton now into 7th place. Paul Tracy is still running just ahead of Boesel in 4th position. Here is Emerson Fittipaldi lined up just behind Gordon, and now he will set his sights on Gordon.
Just remember these speeds. We're looking at cars going almost 230 miles an hour. Watch that pavement go by. Watch the fence whip by. Watch the grandstands go by. This is very high speed, the fastest you'll see.
So the Michigan 500 is off and running 22 laps into the record book, averaging 218.4 miles an hour. The lead taken immediately by Mario Andretti. Nigel Mansell dropped back, battled with Scott Goodyear for a while, and then finally settled down into 2nd place. Paul Tracy came forward around Raul Boesel as Ari Luyendyk had his problem. Now Fittipaldi makes his move down inside of Gordon. and Fittipaldi moves forward. So Robbie Gordon is either setting a pace or suffering a problem.
Well, I don't think he's really suffering. At least doesn't look like it right now, Paul. I think he just realized, or his crew has told him, hey, don't try to burn the candle at both ends at the start. Take it a little easier.
A 500-mile race, Bobby. You've driven hundreds of them. What should be the design, the strategy that a driver plays? Run hard at first and then settle down and then run right at the last?
Well, what they like to all do is what most of them have done right now. Run really hard early on, settle down to the middle. Don't lose anything. Most importantly, try not to get lapped. And then have the last third of the race, or at least the last fourth of the race, to really put it on hard.
Leader of the race, Mario Andretti, as he begins to thread his way through traffic.
Well, Jack showed us that both the Newman-Haas cars were on the front row with Mario, who we see here, and Nigel Mansell. They had Newman-Haas had 2 cars on the front row last year, and it's interesting that neither of them even got to half distance. And in fact, the Ford engine, the contemporary Ford engine that is in Mario's car here, has never managed to win a 500-mile race. So a lot is riding here today.
Battle for third now. Tracy Goodyear.
As I went down to the garages yesterday talking to the various mechanics, a lot of the Chevrolet guys were asking me, do you think the Fords can finish, Bobby? They know that the Fords have a lot more power on them here. And, you know, nobody knows because they haven't done a 500-miler like that. But they are awful fast here.
Tracy using the advantage of the slower car. Mashusta just ahead of him. And he tries to get down inside of Goodyear, but it won't work. By the way, the pronunciation on Mashusta, that is now how his team says they'd like it used. Here's Tracy just alongside of Scott Goodyear. Uses the draft going into the third turn, but Scott Goodyear is going to hang with him.
This is the battle for third.
And keep in mind, Tracy is in a Chevy, Goodyear is in a Ford.
And remember, it was these two men who battled it out at the end of this race last year. So they have resumed their rivalry here on the high banks of Michigan exactly a year later.
Back at the front of the field, Nigel Mansell has now closed up. Using the traffic on Mario Andretti. He comes way high into the corner, gets alongside Mario. Mario has the better line at this point, but look at Nigel Mansell. This is a rookie on a super speedway. He figured it out in about 3 laps of practice.
Well, Paul, one thing I've been noticing on Mario, his last 3 laps ago was 2:16, then 2:14. His last lap was 2:10. Now, some of that's in traffic, but Nigel has caught him from way back, probably 100 yards back, where now he should pull away. So Mario definitely has some sort of a problem.
Both of them pull high to come through the traffic now. Nigel Mansell picks up the lead here in Michigan for the first time, the first lead change in the race today. 28 laps are complete very shortly. They'll start thinking about the pit stops. But Nigel Mansell is in front, and we have had green flag right from the start of this race. So the Michigan 500 is very fast at 217 miles an hour. We'll be back after this message and a word from our ABC stations. Overhead at the Michigan 500, the Goodyear blimp providing aerial views today. It's the Goodyear blimp Spirit from Akron, Ohio. And on the racetrack now, 33 laps are now complete. Nigel Mansell took over the lead from Mario Andretti, and immediately upon doing so, started turning laps at 223 miles an hour. Because of that, as we look at this interval leaderboard, you can see that Mario has dropped back now almost 2 seconds behind the leader of the race. But first and second, well, they're pulling away from the rest of the field. For an update on fourth place, Scott Goodyear, here's Jack Arute.
Well, Paul, you saw Scott Goodyear battling with Paul Tracy. It may have been focus for Goodyear that created the problem. No complaints about the handling, but this piece that goes on the headrest that he can lean up against has come loose, and his head is beginning to bob inside the cockpit. And at 230 miles an hour plus, it's tough to focus on a point when your head's going back and forth. They're going to change it on the first pit stop.
And Jack Arute, one of the complaints in the drivers' meeting this morning was Bobby Rahal's concern with how rough it is.
Well, your head bounces back and forth, even with new aerodynamic helmets. Remember, these are open cockpit cars.
Al Unser Jr., who was running in 13th place, is the first to make a pit stop here today. Other teams now beginning to lay out. This is on Little Al's 34th lap. He is already a lap down to the leader.
He is a previous winner here, but not overly competitive so far today. His teammate Danny Sullivan out with the flu.